Content warning. This episode discusses sexual assault and murder. Listener discretion is advised. On the morning of the 2nd of November, 2007, in the medieval hill town of Perugia, Italy, police broke down the locked door of a bedroom inside a quiet cottage on Via della Pergola. Behind it, they found 21-year-old Meredith Kercher, a British exchange student lying on the floor of her own room, partially covered by a duvet. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed. She had bled to death slowly, from a wound to her throat. What happened over the following 8 years would become one of the most exhaustively covered, relentlessly speculated upon criminal cases of the 21st century. Not primarily because of anything about Meredith herself, but because of who else was living in that cottage, and what would be done, and undone, and done again to two of her roommates in the years that followed. Nearly 2 decades later, the case is still, in some real sense, not finished. A new potential lead surfaced only months ago. A prosecution once thought closed has had unexpected new chapters. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a young woman who came to Italy to study, to make friends, and to build a life for herself, has too often become the least discussed person in her own murder case. Part 1. Perugia Meredith Susanna Cara Kercher grew up in Cowlston, in South London, one of 4 siblings in a close family. By 2007, she was 21 years old, studying at the University of Leeds, and had chosen to spend a year abroad in Italy through the Erasmus exchange program, the same scheme that sends thousands of European students to live and study in a different country each year, immersing themselves in a new language and culture for a period that, for most of them, becomes one of the defining experiences of their early adult lives. She settled in Perugia, a picturesque university town in the Umbria region of central Italy, known for its winding medieval streets and its large population of international students. Meredith moved into a shared cottage on Via della Pergola, taking a room alongside 3 other young women, 2 Italian law students and an American exchange student from Seattle named Amanda Knox. By every account from the people who knew her in Perugia, Meredith was settling into her new life well. She'd made friends both among the other exchange students and within the local community, was progressing in her studies, and had, by the accounts of those closest to her, found real happiness in the life she was building for herself in Italy. She had a boyfriend, a local Perugian man, and an active, engaged social life that reflected exactly the kind of formative, adventurous year abroad the Erasmus program is designed to offer. It's worth pausing on this, deliberately, before the case's far more convoluted legal history takes over the rest of this episode. Because in the years since 2007, so much of the global conversation around this case has centered on the students accused of her murder, and comparatively little of it has centered on Meredith herself. She was a real person, in the middle of what should have been one of the best years of her life, with a family back in London who loved her, and were, quite suddenly, about to lose her in the most violent way imaginable. Part 2. The discovery on the morning of the 2nd of November, 2007. Concern began to build around the cottage on Via della Pergola. Meredith hadn't been seen, her bedroom door was locked, and there were signs inside the house. A broken window in one of the other bedrooms, blood in the bathroom that suggested something was seriously wrong. Amanda Knox, who had spent the previous night at the apartment of her Italian boyfriend of a little over a week, Raphael Solicito, returned to the cottage that morning and told police she'd found blood in the bathroom and become alarmed enough to call both her boyfriend and, eventually, the police. When officers broke down the locked door to Meredith's room, they found her body. An autopsy determined that Meredith had died from hemorrhagic shock, the result of a stab wound to her neck, a death investigators would later determine had likely not been instantaneous, but had taken some time, a detail that added an especially painful dimension to an already devastating case for her family to process. She had also been sexually assaulted. What followed, almost immediately, was an investigation that would become defined, for years afterward, by a deeply troubled process. One that Italian and international legal experts alike would go on to criticize extensively, long after the case's ultimate resolution. Part 3. A chaotic investigation in the days immediately following Meredith's murder. Perugian police and prosecutors, led by prosecutor Giuliano Mignini, focused their attention squarely on Amanda Knox and Raphael Solicito. During an overnight interrogation just days after the murder, a process that Knox and her later legal team, along with human rights observers, would characterize as coercive, conducted without a lawyer present, and according to Knox, involving being struck by police. Knox gave police a statement in which she named her employer, a local bar owner named Patrick Lumumba, as being present at the cottage on the night of the murder and responsible for Meredith's death. It was a statement that would haunt this case, and Knox personally, for close to 2 decades. Patrick Lumumba was arrested and held for roughly 2 weeks before being released once his alibi, that he had been working at his bar that night, corroborated by other witnesses, was confirmed. He had nothing whatsoever to do with Meredith's murder. Knox would later maintain that the statement had been extracted from her under extreme psychological pressure, during a lengthy, aggressive interrogation conducted in a language she wasn't fully fluent in, without proper legal safeguards. Whatever its origins, that false statement, and the genuine harm it caused an innocent man, would become a defining, deeply complicated thread running through the entire rest of this case. One that, remarkably, is still generating fresh legal consequences for Knox in 2025. With Lumumba cleared, investigators turned their focus to Knox and Solicito themselves and built a case around a specific piece of physical evidence, a kitchen knife recovered from Solicito's apartment, on which investigators claimed to have found Knox's DNA on the handle and a trace of Meredith's DNA on the blade. It became, for years, the single most contested piece of forensic evidence in the entire case, a knife whose connection to the crime scene and whose forensic testing methodology independent experts would later dismantle almost entirely. Meanwhile, an entirely separate and far more straightforward thread of evidence was leading investigators towards someone else altogether. Bloody fingerprints recovered from Meredith's pillow and from a piece of toilet paper in the house, which didn't match either Knox or Solicito. That evidence led police to a young man named Ruddy Gedd, originally from the Ivory Coast, who had been living in Italy and was known to some of the other residents of the building. Gedd fled the country almost immediately after the murder, eventually being tracked to Germany, where he was arrested after being stopped for riding a tram without a valid ticket, an almost absurdly mundane detail to be the thing that finally caught up with him. He was extradited back to Italy to face trial. Gedd would ultimately admit that he had been with Meredith on the night of her death, claiming she had invited him back to the cottage. His DNA was found in a bloody handprint on Meredith's pillow, and further biological evidence connected him directly and unambiguously to her body and the crime scene itself. Given the strength of that evidence, Gedd opted for what's known in Italian law as a fast-track trial procedure, and in 2008 was convicted of Meredith's sexual assault and murder, initially receiving a 30-year sentence, later reduced on appeal to 16 years. Part 4. Trial, conviction, and a long appeal despite Ruddy Gedd's conviction, and despite the physical evidence directly and clearly connecting him to the scene. Italian prosecutors proceeded with a separate murder trial against Amanda Knox and Raphael Solicito, built around the far more contested knife evidence and a broader theory that the murder had been the result of some kind of sex game involving all three of them that had gone violently wrong. In December of 2009, following a trial that had drawn extraordinary international media attention, much of it, particularly in the British and Italian press, sensationalized and deeply unflattering toward Knox specifically, both Knox and Solicito were convicted of murder. Knox was sentenced to 26 years in prison, Solicito to 25. What followed was one of the more genuinely bewildering sequences in recent international criminal justice history. In 2011, an appeals court in Perugia overturned both convictions, citing serious, substantive problems with the forensic evidence underpinning the prosecution's case. Independent forensic review had, by this point, seriously undermined confidence in how the DNA evidence from the knife had been collected, handled, and interpreted. Knox and Solicito were released after each having served roughly 4 years in custody. It didn't end there. Italy's highest appellate court, the Court of Cassation, subsequently overturned the 2011 acquittal on procedural grounds, ordering a fresh appellate trial. In 2014, that fresh trial reconvicted both Knox and Solicito. Finally, in March of 2015, the Court of Cassation, Italy's Supreme Court, the final word in the country's legal system, definitively and conclusively overturned the convictions for good, issuing what became known, in the case's extensive legal commentary, as a remarkably pointed and critical ruling, describing what the court characterized as a stunning lack of reliable evidence connecting Knox and Solicito to the actual killing. That 2015 ruling brought the murder case, as far as Italian law is concerned, to its permanent, final conclusion. Amanda Knox and Raphael Solicito have never been, and under Italian law can never again be, tried for Meredith Kercher's murder. Legally speaking, the matter of who is criminally responsible for her death has one clear, settled answer. Ruddy Ged, convicted, and never successfully appealed on the underlying question of his guilt. Part 5. What the evidence actually showed it's worth taking a moment away from the sheer procedural whiplash of appeal after appeal after appeal, to look plainly at what independent forensic review ultimately established about this case, because it's genuinely important to understanding why the final outcome landed the way it did. The knife recovered from Solicito's apartment, the centerpiece of the original prosecution case against Knox, was subjected to independent forensic re-examination during the appeals process. That re-examination found serious problems both with the quantity of DNA material recovered, described by independent experts as being at levels too low to meet reliable scientific testing standards, and with the underlying laboratory procedures used to process it in the first place. In plain terms, the single most important piece of physical evidence used to convict Knox of murder didn't hold up to genuinely rigorous, independent scientific scrutiny. Set against that is the evidence connecting Ruddy Ged to the scene, which was, by comparison, straightforward and largely uncontested throughout the entire process. His DNA, in a bloody handprint directly on Meredith's pillow. His own biological material recovered from her body. His own admission that he had been present in the cottage with her on the night she died. Ged's fast-track trial and conviction were never overturned on the fundamental question of his responsibility for the crime, even as the far more elaborate, multi-person theory of the murder, the version that had also implicated Knox and Solicito, was ultimately dismantled entirely by Italy's highest court. Part 6. The years since for Amanda Knox, exoneration in 2015 didn't mean the case was fully behind her. One specific piece of the original prosecution has continued to generate fresh legal proceedings for her, even decades later. The slander conviction connected to her false, coerced statement naming Patrick Lumumba. That charge, entirely separate from the murder case itself, and never overturned even when the murder convictions were, was reopened in Italian courts in 2024, and Knox was reconvicted. That reconviction was upheld on further appeal in January of 2025. It's a detail that captures something genuinely important about how complicated this case's legal legacy actually is. Amanda Knox is, under Italian law, definitively and found permanently innocent of Meredith's murder, and simultaneously still carries a separate criminal conviction connected to the false statement she gave during that same original, deeply troubled interrogation process. For Ruddy Gedd, life after his 2021 release from prison, having served roughly 13 years of his 16-year sentence, has continued to generate its own separate legal troubles. He was arrested in late 2023 on charges of assaulting a former girlfriend, and as of the most recent reporting, faces a further trial, expected in the latter half of 2025, on charges of sexual assault and violence connected to a different former partner. A case reportedly involving an extensive volume of digital evidence, including photos and messages, gathered by Italian investigators. Amanda Knox has spoken publicly and pointedly about this pattern, expressing her view that the man convicted of killing her roommate has gone on, in the years since his release, to cause harm to other young women. And then, remarkably, in 2025, nearly 18 years after Meredith's murder, the case took one more unexpected turn. Giuliano Mignini, the now-retired prosecutor who originally led the investigation, and who, it's worth remembering, was also the man responsible for the deeply flawed initial case against Knox and Solicito, came forward publicly to say he'd received a tip from a source he considered reliable, naming an entirely new individual never previously considered in connection with the case. Someone reported to have fled Italy within days of Meredith's murder. Subsequent reporting has suggested the person of interest may be a Bulgarian woman who was in Perugia at the time of the killing, though Italian authorities have been notably cautious in how they've characterized her potential involvement, with Mignini himself stating she may be significant to the case as a witness rather than necessarily as a suspect. As of the most recent reporting, Perugia prosecutors had not yet formally decided whether to reopen any aspect of the investigation. It's a genuinely striking coda to a case that most of the world had, by 2015, considered legally closed for good. A reminder that even after 8 years of trials, appeals, and one of the most exhaustively picked over forensic records in recent criminal history, there remained, apparently, threads that had never been fully chased down. Part 7. Whose story this is? There's a tension at the heart of how this case has been told and retold over the better part of 2 decades, and it's one that Meredith Kercher's own family has been notably direct about in recent years. In August of 2026, Meredith's sister, Stephanie Kercher, spoke publicly to criticize a comedy show that Amanda Knox was performing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, a show titled Cartwheel, referencing a widely circulated, contested claim from the original investigation that Knox had performed cartwheels inside a police station in the days following Meredith's murder. Stephanie Kercher argued that a comedic treatment of this material, regardless of the performer's own intentions, normalizes and trivializes violence against women. Knox, for her part, has defended the show publicly, describing it as an attempt to honor Meredith's memory, while also reckoning with what she has described as her own wrongful persecution throughout the case. It's not really this podcast's place to adjudicate that particular disagreement. Both positions come from a place of genuine, hard-won perspective on an experience most people will thankfully never have to understand firsthand. It has also, unavoidably, often overshadowed the much simpler, much sadder story sitting underneath all of it. A 21-year-old student from South London, studying abroad for the first time, building a life and a group of friends in a beautiful Italian hill town, who never got the chance to come home. Meredith Kercher was 21 years old. She loved music, She was close with her family, and by every account from the people who spent that autumn with her in Perugia, she was doing exactly what a year abroad is supposed to offer a young person. Growing into herself, a long way from home, surrounded by new friends and new possibilities. Nearly 2 decades later, with one man convicted and never successfully overturned, another set of convictions definitively reversed by Italy's highest court, a slander case still generating headlines. And now, remarkably, a fresh and still unresolved lead investigators are only just beginning to look into. Her family is still, in some very real sense, waiting for the full and final story of what happened to her to actually be told. Thank you for listening.